Nobody remembered the last time a human had been asked to wait inside the throne hall. Sephra stood alone in the center of it, a leather ledger pressed to her chest, watching the doors at the far end shudder open under the weight of something massive. Cold air rushed in from outside. Then a shadow fell across the stone floor, long and dark, and Emperor Vorin the Ashen walked through. He was bigger than she had expected. Most dragons who entered Dracathorn reduced their form slightly for the corridors. Vorin did not. His scales were the color of old iron, dulled in places where the scarring was worst, long ridged burns along his left flank that had not healed cleanly. He smelled of smoke and rain, and something underneath both that she could not name. He had been in the air for 3 days straight. She could see it in the way he moved, slower than a creature of his size should move, his wings folded tight and slightly uneven. He stopped when he saw her. She bowed, not a servant's bow, the kind that faced the floor. A court bow, precise, angled at 30 degrees, the kind the old head steward Croth had drilled into every citadel worker before he died. She held it for exactly 4 seconds. Then she straightened and said, "Welcome home, Your Radiance. I have a situation report. I suggest you read it before you speak to anyone in the court." Vorin looked at her for a long moment. She was not sure he fully registered what she was. His gold eyes moved from her face to the ledger and back. Then he walked past her without a word. She followed him, not close, 4 paces behind, which was correct, but she followed. He reached the base of the great throne, a structure carved from a single mountain of black obsidian, and stood with his back to her, staring up at it. She could hear him breathing. It was not the steady breath of someone arriving home. It was the breath of someone who had just realized something was wrong and was not yet sure how wrong. "Where is Osivran?" he said. His voice was lower than she had expected. Not loud, just large in the way that filled a room without effort. "Bedridden, Your Radiance. Scale rot. He is alive. His attendants say he can receive you tomorrow morning if you wish." "Harold." "Defected to the Western Fae Accord in the 43rd year of your absence. He took 12 of his personal guard and left before sunrise. We have had no communication from him since." "Vorondusk and Maelkov." She did not hesitate. Dead. Vorondusk in the battle for the Pale Basin in year 61. Maelkov 2 years later, a fever complication from a wound taken in the same campaign. They are in the official record. Vorin turned then. He looked at her the way she had seen dragons look at unexpected things, not with anger, but with the slow, unsettled attention of something that has encountered something that does not fit. "You are a maid," he said. "I was assigned to interior maintenance in my 3rd year of service," she said. "Yes." "Then why are you the one standing here?" It was not a question exactly, she answered it anyway. Because when head steward Croth died, no one was appointed to replace him. The court dragons each assumed another would step forward. None did. I kept the administrative work going because someone had to, and I was already doing most of the record keeping. She held out the ledger. "Everything is in here. 11 years. Every decision I made, every letter I sent, every arrangement. I have not hidden anything." He did not take it, not yet. He kept looking at her. "The treasury," he said. "Partially raided. A court sorcerer named Duveth left in year 7 with 3 dragon wagons of stored gold. He went south. We were not able to recover it. The remainder is intact and fully accounted for in the ledger." She paused, then added, "The grain stores are full. The courts are running. 4 of your 7 territories are still sending tribute on a modified schedule. The other 3, I can explain those separately. It requires some context." The silence lasted long enough that she counted her own heartbeats out of habit. 19. Then Vorin reached out and took the ledger from her hands. His claws were careful around it. That surprised her. She had expected him to take it roughly, the way powerful things often handled small things. But he held it like something he understood mattered, and that told her more about him in that moment than anything the old court records had. "You will be here in the morning," he said. "Yes, Your Radiance. If I have questions, I will answer them." He turned back toward the throne. She understood she was dismissed. She bowed to his back, correct form, 4 seconds, and walked back toward the servant corridor. She did not let herself feel anything until the door closed behind her. Then she leaned against the stone wall, pressed her hands flat against it, and let out a breath she had been holding, in some form or another, for 11 years. The ledger was in his hands now. That was all she had ever been able to control. What he did with it was his choice. She had made enough choices for one lifetime, or so she thought. She was wrong about that. 3 days passed. No one saw the Emperor. Food was left at the throne room door at morning and evening. It went untouched the first night, half-eaten the second, gone entirely by the third. Sephra left a small oil lamp alongside the third tray because she had noticed the throne room's northern sconces were burning low, and the ledger's index pages were written in a smaller hand than the main entries. She did not mention this to anyone. On the fourth morning, a knock came at the door of the steward's storage closet, which was what Sephra used as an office, because it was the only room in the citadel that no one else wanted. The knock was not from a fist. It was from a single claw, tapped twice. She opened the door. Vorin said, "The grain arrangement, the one in year 3, explain it to me." She stepped back so he could see inside the room, shelves of sorted correspondence, a small writing desk, 3 candles. He did not come in. He was too large to fit comfortably, and they both knew it, and neither of them said anything about it. There was a shortage coming, she said. The Western Mountain Pass had 2 bad harvests back to back, and the military supply lines were pulling heavily from the central stores. I estimated we had 14 months before the shortfall became critical. And the court. I brought it to Lord Warden Tessevrek twice. He told me to document it and leave it with his secretary. She paused. I checked with the secretary 3 months later. It had not been read. Vorin's expression did not change, but something behind his eyes did. So you contacted a grain merchant. Posick of Brexford. He was known to the servant network. He had supplied the lower kitchens for years, reliable and fair. I approached him privately and offered stored dragon-scale lacquer in barter. The court had 3 rooms full of it, unvalued, unsorted. He had buyers in the southern trade cities who wanted it for waterproofing. She folded her hands. We exchanged over 3 years. The grain stores stayed full. No one in the citadel went hungry. You had no authority to make that exchange. No, Your Radiance, I did not. You used imperial assets. I used materials that had been catalogued as low-priority surplus for 60 years. She met his eyes, which she had learned was not considered respectful in formal court settings, but she had also learned that Vorin was not currently in a formal court setting. He was standing in a corridor outside a storage closet asking her questions at dawn, and that changed the register somewhat. If I had done nothing, we would have had a famine by spring of year 4. The Western territories would have collapsed. You would have returned to a different kind of problem. He was quiet for a moment. The letters to the territory governors after Haroth defected. The court knew about the defection within a week. The governors did not. I knew that when the governors found out, through rumor, as they would have, there would be panic about the military chain of command. At least 2 governors would have assumed the empire was failing and stopped tribute early. So you wrote to them in my name? Yes. I was in the middle of the Sunken Skis campaign. Yes. You could not reach me. You did not try. The military couriers were routing through active combat zones. A letter about administrative stability was not worth a soldier's life. She said it simply, not to impress him, because it was true and she had made the calculation clearly at the time. I told the governors that the military structure was intact, that Haroth's departure was a personal matter, and that tribute schedules would continue unchanged. All of which was true enough to prevent panic. Vorin leaned back slightly, the way she had noticed large things did when they needed to look at something from a different distance. He held the ledger up, not open, just held it, looking at the cover. There are 214 entries in here, he said. Decisions, choices, things you did without authorization across 11 years. She waited. How many of them were wrong? She had thought about that question before. She had thought about it many times during those years, lying awake, running through outcomes. 17 was suboptimal, she said. 3 were genuinely wrong, I can show you which ones and explain what I should have done differently. None of them caused direct harm, but they caused delays that cost us resources we didn't easily recover. You kept a record of your own mistakes. It seemed important. Vorin looked at her for a long time. She had spent 11 years being looked at by dragons and learning not to shrink under it. She did not shrink now. General Osivrin will receive me this morning, he said finally. I want you present. She blinked just once, just briefly. Your Radiance, it is not customary for a servant to attend a private military briefing. I am aware of that, he said. Be there at the second hour. He left. She stood in the doorway of her small office and thought about the word customary and what it meant when an emperor decided it did not apply. Then she went to find her good pen. If there was a meeting, there should be a record. There was always a record. The summons arrived on a Tuesday. Sephra was in the middle of drafting a revised tribute schedule for the Coldwater Basin territories when the young Wyvern courier slid the folded notice under her office door with the kind of speed that suggested he did not want to be seen delivering it. She unfolded it, read it once, and set it flat on the desk. Tribunal of Court Conduct. Her name. The charge, unauthorized assumption of administrative authority in violation of service tier restrictions, sections 4 through 9, convening in 2 days in the lower court chamber. Presiding officer, Lord Dragon Thuvek. She had known something like this was coming. She had known it the moment Vorin walked through the gate, and she had become, suddenly, visible. For 11 years she had moved through the citadel like furniture, useful, unremarkable, present. The moment Vorin sat with her ledger for 3 days and then asked her to attend a private military briefing, she stopped being furniture and became something the court had to deal with. Thuvek was younger than most of the court dragons, golden-scaled and careful in the way that deeply ambitious creatures were careful, never loud, never obviously threatening, always correct in procedure and lethal in application. He had done nothing during the 11 years. He had stayed in his tower and managed his own affairs. He had not starved and had not lost anything. He had simply waited, the way a dragon with enough personal resources could wait, and now Vorin was back, and Thuvek had watched the Emperor spend 3 days with a human maid's ledger and understood exactly what that meant for the court's pride. He needed the ledger buried. He needed Sephra Small again. She appeared at the tribunal without a defender. She had not asked for one. When the tribunal's clerk asked her how she wished to be represented, she said, "By what I did, that's all I have." Thuvek's questions were surgical. Yes or no, did you send those letters without authorization? Yes. Did you exchange imperial goods without authorization? Yes. Did you act in a role you were not assigned and were not qualified for? She paused on that one. Then she said, I was not assigned it. Whether I was qualified, I suppose we could let the results speak. Thuvek's eyes narrowed slightly. He did not like that answer. He moved to the next question. She stood in the center of the chamber and answered everything truthfully. She did not apologize and she did not embellish. When Thuvek asked her if she understood she had broken the rules of her service tier, she said yes. When he asked her if she understood why those rules existed, she said yes. When he asked her why she had broken them anyway, she looked at him without blinking and said, because people were going to be hungry, and none of you were doing anything about it. The chamber went very quiet. Thuvek was preparing his closing argument. She could see him drawing a breath, organizing his words, when the rear door of the chamber opened. No one announced the Emperor. He simply walked in and stood at the back, which was somehow worse than any entrance, because it meant he had been there long enough to hear things and no one had noticed him. Thuvek stopped speaking. Vorin surveyed the room. His gaze moved over the tribunal members, over Thuvek, and settled on Sephra, standing alone in the center of the floor, no chair, no table, no ally. He looked at her the way she had come to recognize in the last few days, not as something small, but as something he was still working out how to see. This tribunal is concluded, Vorin said. Imperial prerogative, everyone leave. Thuvek found his voice. He was careful, respectful, and absolutely unyielding. He argued the rule of law. He argued that precedent mattered. He argued that if servants in the lowest tiers began making executive decisions, the structure the empire was built on would erode. It was, Sephra thought, not entirely a bad argument. It just was not the real argument. The real argument was that Thuvek had done nothing for 11 years, and a human woman had outworked every dragon in the citadel, and he needed that fact to disappear. Vorin let him finish. Then he said, I have read 214 entries in a ledger written by this woman over 11 years. I have read the accounting of the same period written by the court. Her entries describe decisions, consequences, and corrections. The court's accounting describes a series of years in which almost no decisions were made at all. He paused. You are welcome to argue rule of law with me, Thuvek, but you will do it somewhere that is not this room. The tribunal ended. The chamber emptied. When it was just Vorin and Sephra in the space, he said, Osivrin told me something last night. She waited. He said that in year 4, when the grain shortage was becoming visible, 3 of the court dragons discussed holding a formal emergency session to address it. They scheduled it, then they postponed it, then they forgot about it. He looked at her. He said no one ever thought to ask you what you had already done about it. She said nothing. They forgot you were there, Vorin said. Most people did, she said. I made sure of it. It was easier to work that way. He studied her for a moment. Then he said something that had no easy answer and that she suspected he knew had no easy answer. How long can a person work in the dark before it becomes something they deserve to leave behind? She thought about that for the rest of the day. She did not yet know what he intended by it, but she thought about it. She found him sitting on the steps. Not on the throne, below it, on the broad obsidian steps that led up to the seat, the ones carved with the names of every emperor in Draconian history. Vorin was sitting on the 3rd step from the bottom, forearms resting on his knees, staring at the far wall. He was not reading. He was not doing anything she had seen him do before. He did not look up when she entered, but he said, I asked for you. I know, I came as soon as the message reached me. Sit down. She looked at the steps, then sat on the lowest one. They were both quiet for a moment. This was a stranger thing than she had words for, a human woman and an ancient emperor sitting on the steps of the ashen throne like 2 people waiting for rain to pass. I ordered a full accounting, Vorin said, of the court's activities, year by year across my absence, not just Thuvek, all of them. The archivists finished yesterday. I know, they asked me to verify some of the dates. What they produced, against your ledger, I spent the night reading both side by side. He was quiet for a moment. Do you know what I found? She did know, roughly, but she waited. In year 7, when Duveth left with the treasury wagons, there were 4 court dragons who were in the citadel and aware of the theft within 6 hours. 2 of them sent messages to each other about it. Neither sent a message to the governors, to the guard, or to anyone who could have intercepted him at the southern gate. He said it flatly, without heat. That was somehow worse than if he had been angry. He was in the citadel because I had authorized his access. He used my absence as his window. And the court watched him leave. Sephra said nothing. You wrote the incident report. You filed it. You sent a copy to every territory governor so they would know to watch their borders for Duveth. He looked at her sideways. You were the only one who did anything. Someone had to. Why? He said it like it was a real question, not a rhetorical one. You were a servant. The theft was not your problem. The governors were not your responsibility. If the empire fell apart, you would have found another place to live. Another posting. Humans are adaptable, I know that much. She thought about how to answer that honestly. I knew people in those territories, she said. Not important people. Posick, the grain merchant, the courier families who ran the mountain routes, the keeper of the Coldwater Basin way station, a woman named Helv who had been doing that job for 30 years. If the tribute collapsed and the court stopped managing the trade agreements, those people suffered first and worst. The dragons in their towers would be fine. The humans in the valleys would not. He absorbed that. You did it for other humans. I did it because I could, she said, and because I was there, and because if I didn't, no one else was going to. She paused. I don't think that's a complicated reason. Vorin was quiet for a long time. Long enough that one of the wall sconces burned down and gutted and went dark, and neither of them moved to relight it. "I was not a poor emperor," he said finally, and the way he said it told her it cost him something to say it. "Before the war, the territories were stable, the courts ran, the army was strong. I think I genuinely believed that what I built was solid enough to maintain itself. It was solid enough for peacetime," she said carefully. "The war pulled too many resources and too much attention in one direction too fast. Cracks that would have been caught early got wide before anyone noticed them. Because no one was watching. Because the ones who were supposed to watch assumed someone else would." He turned to look at her fully then, not sideways, not at a distance. He looked at her the way she had seen him look at things he was deciding how to value. "Were you afraid?" he asked. "During those years, all of it?" She had not expected that question. She sat with it for a moment before she answered, because she owed it honesty. "Every single day," she said. "I was afraid I would make the wrong call and people would pay for it. I was afraid someone would notice what I was doing and use it to destroy me. I was afraid you would come home and be furious, that everything I had done would be called overstepping and I would be punished for it. But you kept going." "I kept going because the alternative was doing nothing, and I had seen what happened when the people with power did nothing." She looked at her hands. "The small ones always pay for it." The silence after that was different from the other silences. It had weight in it. Something was being decided. She did not know what. Then Vorin said, "You will not be a maid anymore." She looked up. He was already rising from the steps, moving toward the throne, not to sit on it, just standing near it, as if proximity was enough for now. He said it again, not louder, just clearer. "You will not be a maid anymore. I have not yet decided what you will be, but not that." She nodded. She did not know what else to do. Walking back to her office that night, she passed Helv's letter, the one from the Coldwater Way station keeper, thanking her for the supply adjustment 2 winters back. She had pinned it above her desk 3 years ago. She left it there. Some things you kept not because they were useful, because they were true. The appointment was registered on a Wednesday morning, quiet as a season changing. Sephra of Brexford, imperial steward of Drachythorn Citadel, entered into the official record by the archivist's office. No ceremony, no announcement in the court hall. Vorin had simply gone to the archivists and told them to write it down. By afternoon, the entire citadel knew. By the following morning, Thuvek was gone, not exiled yet, but gone from the citadel, riding south with a small escort, which was within his rights as a court dragon. What was not within his rights was the set of letters he sent ahead of him to the 3 territory governors who had stopped sending tribute. Sephra found out about them the same way she found out about most things that happened in Drachythorn. Someone in the servant network saw the courier dispatch and told someone who told someone who told her. Thuvek's letters said the emperor had returned diminished from the war, that a human now held influence over the throne, that the leadership of the empire was compromised, and that a stabilizing figure, not a replacement, never that word, always regent, always temporary, was necessary for the empire's good. 2 of the 3 governors read the letters and sent polite, non-committal replies. The 3rd, Durek, Stone Troll governor of the Coldwater Basin, a short and meticulous figure who had been receiving Sephra's correspondence for 9 years, sent his copy of Thuvek's letter to Drachythorn immediately, along with a handwritten note that said, "I believe this was not meant to reach you. It reached me instead." The letter arrived on Sephra's desk because she was the steward now and territory correspondence came to the steward. She read it. Then she sat for a moment, feeling the specific and uncomfortable weight of being right about something before you wanted to be. She wrote 3 letters to all 3 governors under the imperial seal, which was now legally hers to use. She told them that Thuvek did not speak for the throne, that the emperor was present and fully capable, that any governor who entered a formal compact with Thuvek would be treated under imperial law as having declared rebellion against the Ashen Throne. She signed them. She sent them the same day. Then she told Vorin what she had done. He stood in the corridor outside her office and read the copies she had made. He read them slowly. She watched his expression and could not read it, which she was used to with dragons, but there was a moment, brief, unguarded, where something moved through his face that was not quite anger and not quite something she had a name for. "You acted without bringing it to me first," he said. "Yes, I judged that speed mattered more than process. By the time I found you and explained and you decided, the governors would have been sitting with Thuvek's version of events for half a day." She said it plainly. "If I was wrong, I will accept that." He looked at the letters again. Then he pressed his imperial seal into the wax on each one, retroactive confirmation, and handed them back. "Next time," he said, "tell me first, even if it costs an hour." She nodded. He kept looking at her. "You are not going to apologize?" "For the decision, no, I made the right call." Something shifted in his expression. She thought it might have been respect, though she had not seen him express it often enough to be certain. 10 days later, Thuvek arrived at the citadel gates with an armed escort of 9 dragons and a formal petition for a council of senior dragons, an old legal mechanism, barely used in 300 years, that allowed senior court members to call a vote on the emperor's fitness to rule. It was procedurally legal. It was designed, in every possible way, to be as public and damaging as possible. What Thuvek found when he arrived was not the citadel he expected. The outer courtyard had been prepared, not for a confrontation, for a reading. Stone boards, the kind used for public edicts, had been erected along both sides of the entrance path. On them, mounted and clearly visible, was the full accounting, the court's record of inaction on one side, Sephra's administrative record on the other. Year by year, decision by decision, placed directly beside each other with no narration, no interpretation, just the record. Thuvek's escort had to walk between those boards to reach the courtyard. 3 of the 9 dragons in his escort slowed as they read. 2 stopped entirely. By the time they reached Vorin, who was standing in the center of the courtyard, unhurried, alone, only 6 remained behind Thuvek, and 2 of those were already not looking at him. Vorin waited for Thuvek to speak. Thuvek made his argument. The emperor was compromised. Sentiment had replaced judgment. Elevating a human had set a precedent that would unravel the empire's structure. It was a real argument, made for entirely wrong reasons, by someone who had spent 11 years in a tower while the empire cracked. Vorin answered him. His voice did not rise. "You had everything she had. You had more. Rank, authority, resources, access. You chose to use none of it." He looked at Thuvek without expression. "She is not here because I am sentimental. She is here because when the empire needed someone to hold it together, she was the one who stood up. You were not." He paused. "The council is denied. Your court rank is revoked. You have 14 days to vacate your tower." Thuvek's petition collapsed before it began. The 6 remaining dragons offered no objection. He left that evening, and the citadel watched him go in total silence. Sufra watched from the upper corridor window. She did not feel triumphant. She felt tired in the specific way that comes after something has finally been settled, not the tiredness of defeat, but the tiredness of a weight that has been carried too long and has only just been set down. She went back to her office. There were letters to answer. There were always letters to answer. The Andovva delegation arrived on a grey morning in early autumn, when the mountain passes smelled of wet stone and the lower citadel windows were beginning to frost at the edges. Andovva had declared itself a symbolic independent city-state 6 years ago, not a military declaration, not a rupture, just a quiet assertion that it intended to govern itself by its own elected council and would no longer accept unilateral decisions from Drekathan. Sufra had kept the dialogue open through all 6 years. She had kept the trade route running. She had never threatened and never pleaded. She had just stayed in contact, consistently and without drama, because losing Andovva entirely served no one. The delegation was 8 people, 6 human council members, 2 half-fey representatives who handled the mountain trade networks. They arrived in a wagon that was practical rather than ceremonial, and the council's head, a weathered man named Button, who had spent 30 years building the Andovva Council from a small local dispute bored into an actual governing body, stepped down and looked at the citadel with the careful expression of someone calculating odds. Safra met them at the outer gate. She was wearing the steward's grey sash. She carried no guards. She had debated this. Varun had offered a formal Unna escort, and she had thought about it and declined. An Unna escort said, "We are powerful and you should respect that." She did not want to begin a negotiation by reminding Andovva of power dynamics they had already chosen to step away from. She wanted to begin it with a person at a gate, meeting them as they arrived. Button looked at her for a moment, then he looked at the sash, then back at her face. He said, "You are the one who kept writing to us." "Yes," she said, "I am glad you came." He nodded slowly, like someone confirming something he had suspected. "We heard what happened here after the Emperor returned." "Some of it is accurate," she said. "Come inside and we will talk about all of it." The negotiation took 4 days. Varun was present, seated to one side, listening, occasionally asking a direct question, but he had made clear before they began that the steward spoke first, and the steward spoke for the throne in this room. Button had glanced at Varun when this was announced, perhaps expecting the Emperor to qualify it, and Varun had said nothing and looked at Safra. Button had nodded slowly and turned back to her. They did not restore the old tribute arrangement. That was not what Andovva needed, and not what the Empire needed either. What they negotiated was a partial compact. Andovva would provide specialized stonework and access to its mountain trade routes in exchange for imperial legal protections and formal recognition of the elected council. It was a new kind of arrangement. The Empire had not made arrangements like it before. On the third day, during a break in the formal sessions, one of the younger council members, a woman named Brun, perhaps 25, who had been taking notes the whole time and watching Safra the way people watched things they were trying to understand, asked her a direct question. It was the kind of directness that happened when people stopped being formal because they had something they actually needed to know. She asked, "How did you make them see you?" Safra set down the cup she was holding. The honest answer was the only answer worth giving. "I didn't," she said. "I just didn't stop. Eventually what I had done was too large to be invisible." She thought about it for a moment. The work was always there. The proof was always building. I couldn't force anyone to look at it. I could only make sure that when they finally did look, there was something real to see. Brun wrote something in her notes. Safra did not ask what. Varun signed the compact on the 4th day. He used the full imperial seal. It went into the official record as the Andovva Compact, year 304 of the Draconian calendar, negotiated by Imperial Steward Safra of Brexford. That evening, after the delegation had gone to their guest rooms and the paperwork had been filed and the citadel had settled into its nighttime quiet, Varun appeared in the doorway of Safra's office. She was sorting correspondence. She did not look up immediately because she had learned that he did not usually require immediate attention. He said what he came to say on his own schedule. "When I arrived at the gate," he said, "and you were standing there with that ledger, I almost did not stop." She looked up then. "I was tired," he said. "I had been flying for 3 days. I saw a servant at a gate and I nearly walked past." He said it without drama, just the fact of it, which was, she understood, its own kind of cost to say. "I stopped because you bowed correctly. I noticed it because it was right, and it made me look at you, and then you spoke. That was all." "I know," she said. "I was counting on it." He looked at her. "You prepared for the bow." "I practiced it for a week before you were due back. I only had one chance to make you notice me before you walked past." She paused. "Everything after that depended on you stopping." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Thank you." She had waited 11 years, in various forms, to hear those words. She had not known she was waiting for them until they arrived. They were small 2 words, simply said, and they were everything. "You are welcome, Your Radiance," she said. He left. She sat at her desk for a moment, doing nothing, which was unusual for her. Then she picked up her pen. That evening, the archivists updated the official record on Varun's instruction. The entry for Imperial Steward of Dracathun read: Sufferer of Brexford, appointed year 304. Service record, 11 years of administrative function, wartime period. Designation, the archivists had suggested distinguished, but Varun had crossed the word out and written his own. Indispensable. One word in his hand. It was in the record now, and the record, as Sufra knew better than anyone, did not forget.